In the twilight centuries of the Roman Empire, as its might waned under the relentless pressure of barbarian tribes and internal strife, a new star was rising in the east. This ascent, which would herald 4 centuries of conflict with Rome, did not begin with thunderous battles or imperial decrees, but with a personal tragedy that would reshape the destiny of an entire continent. Ardashir and Shapur, 2 Persian brothers, grandsons of King Sasan and descendants of an ancient aristocratic lineage, ruled neighboring lands. As is often the case among ambitious individuals, their blood ties could not prevent rivalry. Each yearned for sole dominion over the region, and in 222 AD, they arranged a meeting to settle their disputes. Fate, however, intervened. The roof of the house where they were to meet unexpectedly collapsed, claiming Shapur's life. Some deemed it a tragic accident, others a divine omen. For Ardashir, it was an unequivocal sign from above, confirming his chosen status. 2 years later, in 224 AD, Ardashir was crowned Shahanshah, King of Kings, following his triumph at the Battle of Hormozgan, where the last Parthian ruler was defeated. Thus was born the Sasanian Empire, a successor to the culture and symbols of the ancient Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great and Darius I. This was a Persian revival, driven by a lofty ambition, not merely to reclaim lost glory, but to surpass it. Ardashir became the founder not only of a new state, but of a new era. He overthrew the weakened Arsasid dynasty and declared Zoroastrianism the state religion, re-establishing the link between divine and royal power. Persepolis once again resonated in verse, and nostalgia for the bygone empire intertwined with a fresh surge of self-awareness and ambitious designs. The tragic event, which began with a collapsing roof and the death of a close relative, laid the groundwork for the formation of a formidable adversary to the Roman Empire. This was an empire destined to outlast Roman emperors, bloody wars, and devastating epidemics. Even in its decline, it managed to lay the foundations of art, science, and spirituality, leaving an indelible mark on both East and West. Ardashir I, proclaimed Shahanshah, wasted no time, understanding that a mere crown was insufficient to consolidate his power. He needed to win the hearts of his subjects and earn the respect of his enemies. Following the fall of Parthia, he launched a sweeping campaign of territorial, political, and religious reorganization, laying the foundations of the new Persian state. The old Parthian nobility, which Ardashir considered corrupt, disunited, and overly dependent on Rome, was systematically eradicated. In its place, he established a centralized administration, directly subservient to the throne, making the king the ultimate source of law, wealth, and justice. The empire ceased to be a confederation of minor kingdoms, as it had been under the Arsacids. It was transformed into a unified, hierarchical system of power, with the monarch at its head, reflecting divine order. Ctesiphon, situated on the banks of the Tigris River, was chosen as the capital. From there, Ardashir actively promoted the restoration of Zoroastrianism as the state religion. Sacred fires once again blazed in temples, and the priestly magi became indispensable allies of royal authority. The concept of the king as chosen by the supreme deity Ahura Mazda was reaffirmed. State governance was now viewed not merely as a military or political task, but as a sacred duty. The religious revival in Persia also pursued strategic objectives. By embracing Christianity, Rome had forged a powerful ideological foundation, while Ardashir, in strengthening Zoroastrianism, erected not only a geopolitical but also a philosophical frontier. 2 states, 2 faiths, 2 philosophies. A clash was inevitable. However, the Persian ruler did not confine himself to internal affairs. He understood that a resounding victory over his primary adversary, Rome, was essential to affirm his authority. In the early years of the new empire, he he organized military campaigns into Roman territories in Mesopotamia, Armenia, and Syria. This clearly signaled that Persia had not merely returned, but was ready to dominate. Ardashir quickly became a symbol of revival. He was depicted on triumphal reliefs as a valiant warrior on horseback, crushing enemies under the protection of Ahura Mazda. Art and imperial symbolism became tools of propaganda and unity. Persia was rebuilt not only through military might but also through symbols, rituals, and myths. By the time of his death in 242 AD, the Sasanian Empire was firmly established as a regional leader. Yet, what the founder had begun, his son Shapur was destined to elevate to unprecedented heights. The ascent was only just beginning, and Rome would soon feel the full might of the reborn Lion of the East. In 309 AD, the Sasanian state found itself at a historical crossroads. Following the death of King Hormuz II, a fierce struggle for supreme power erupted. The Persian nobility, embroiled in discord and confusion, moved to eliminate all adult contenders for the throne, fearing the concentration of power in a single individual. The only remaining hope was an unborn heir. In an unprecedented act of symbolism, the crown was placed upon the belly of one of the deceased monarch's pregnant wives, thereby proclaiming the yet-to-be-born infant as king of Persia. Thus began the reign of Shapur II, crowned before his birth, a testament to the Persians' faith in the future, even amidst complete uncertainty. During his infancy, the empire was governed by regents, but upon reaching adulthood, Shapur proved that his destiny was divinely ordained. He not only managed to retain the power acquired in such an unusual manner, but also became one of the most outstanding rulers in Persian history. His foremost task was the defense of the state's borders. The southern territories of the empire were constantly subjected to raids by Arab tribes. In a series of swift military campaigns, Shapur achieved a decisive victory over them, securing the region and earning the honorary title of Slayer of Arabs. This was not merely a symbolic act but a real defense of the empire's cultural and strategic frontiers against encroachments from the desert. However, Shapur did not rest on his laurels, turning his gaze westward towards Rome. In a protracted struggle for influence, Shapur II repeatedly challenged the Roman Empire in the provinces of Mesopotamia and Armenia. In 359 AD, he launched an offensive that culminated in the capture of the Roman fortress of Amida after an exhausting 73-day siege. This victory granted him control over crucial trade routes and marked a turning point in the balance of power. Shapur proved himself not only a talented military commander, but also a far-sighted reformer. He reorganized the tax system, reformed the army, and strengthened central administration. His 70-year reign became an era of consolidation for the Sasanian Empire as a powerful cultural and military state. However, Shapur II's triumphant reign was not without its tragic costs. The Christian community, suspected of secret sympathies towards the hostile Roman Empire, suffered severe repression. This somber episode of religious intolerance cast a dark shadow over his otherwise brilliant rule, symbolizing the internal contradictions of the era. While strengthening the empire's external borders, Shapur II inadvertently sowed the seeds of future discord, which would bear bitter fruit in subsequent centuries. At the time of his death in 379 AD, the Persian Empire stood before the world at the zenith of its power, vast, unified, and awe-inspiring. Undoubtedly, this marked the apogee of the First Sasanian Golden Age, a triumph for a ruler whose ascent to the throne began even before his birth. After Shapur II departed the historical stage, the Sasanian Empire entered a period of relative calm, yet beneath the veneer of external prosperity lay hidden instability. For almost 7 decades, from 379 to 449 AD, the intensity of conflicts with Byzantium significantly diminished, and rulers succeeded one another on the throne who, perhaps lacking the military genius of their predecessor, nonetheless skillfully maintained the smooth functioning of the state apparatus. The first of these was Ardashir II, Shapur II's half-brother, followed by Shapur III and Bahram IV. None of them scaled the heights of glory achieved by their great predecessor, but each contributed to the pragmatic management of the legacy they inherited. In the history of the Sasanian Empire, there are rulers whose actions evoke mixed assessments from contemporaries and posterity. One such monarch was Yazdijerd I, who reigned from 399 to 421 AD. His rule was marked by an unconventional approach to religious matters and diplomatic prowess, leading some historians to draw parallels between him and the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. Yazdijerd I granted unprecedented freedom of worship to Christians, Jews, and representatives of other religious communities. Furthermore, he assumed the role of mentor to the young Byzantine prince, the future Emperor Theodosius II. His alliance with a Jewish princess and his policy of reconciliation with various social groups earned him the gratitude of oppressed minorities, yet simultaneously provoked the ire of the Zoroastrian elite and conservative nobility, who perceived his actions as weakness and a departure from traditional values. Yazdijerd I's mysterious death, possibly due to poisoning or conspiracy, attested to the fact that his liberal views did not find universal approval. Upon Yazdijerd I's death, the throne passed to his son, Bahram V, better known as Bahram Gur, whose name became steeped in legends and myths within Persian culture. Bahram Gur was an outstanding warrior and a passionate hunter, possessing charisma and combining military prowess with a love for the arts. He patronized poets, musicians, and epic storytellers, who later inspired the creation of the famous Shahnameh. However, despite all his virtues, Bahram V was unable to resolve the deep-seated social contradictions that were gradually undermining the foundations of the empire. For centuries, borderlands, particularly Armenia, became an arena of rivalry between the Persian and Byzantine empires. Alliances formed and dissolved depending on circumstances, and diplomacy evolved into a complex game where bishops, governors, and envoys deftly navigated, asserting their interests under the guise of serving their respective empires. The power of the nobility grew steadily. Large landowners, known as viewsreggen, increasingly resembled feudal lords, concentrating immense wealth and influence in their hands. Unfair taxes, rampant favoritism among the aristocracy, and deepening inequality undermined the common people's trust in the existing imperial order, sowing seeds of discontent. The state apparatus continued to function, but its stability became increasingly tenuous. Beneath a veneer of external prosperity, Persia teetered on the brink. Every diplomatic decision aimed at preventing open conflict simultaneously weakened central authority, eroding its foundations. The flames of rebellion had not yet ignited, but the tinder was already laid. The next significant chapter in the empire's history was poised to begin with the ascension of a monarch who dared to change everything, even at the risk of dismantling the system from within. In the late 5th century, when the Sasanian Empire appeared stabilized but was weakened by internal contradictions, an extraordinary figure emerged on the political stage whose actions shook the very foundations of the existing order. Kavad I, son of Perez I, ascended the throne in 488 AD, marking a pivotal moment in Persian history, replete with both revolutionary transformations and sharp conflicts. Kavad I was no typical emperor. Despite being placed on the throne by the nobility, he quickly made it clear that he had no intention of blindly serving the interests of the privileged classes. In a defiant gesture, he supported a religious and social reformer named Mazdak, who preached doctrines combining elements of Zoroastrianism with ideas of equality, the redistribution of land, property, and even women. Mazdak's teachings posed an open challenge to the wealthy nobility, advocating for the redistribution of surplus wealth in favor of the impoverished segments of the population. Naturally, such an idea met with fierce resistance from the Persian aristocracy, who saw it not only as an economic threat but also as an assault on their privileged status and established way of life. Kavad's support for the Mazdakite movement made him the first monarch in Persian history to attempt to implement a form of state socialism. However, he paid a high price for this endeavor. In 496 AD, influential aristocrats, backed by the Zoroastrian clergy, orchestrated a conspiracy that resulted in Kavad's overthrow and imprisonment in the so-called Prison of Oblivion. His brother Jamis, a more compliant and amenable instrument in the hands of the nobility, was placed on the throne. But Kavad was not one to surrender. He managed a daring escape from captivity. Fleeing eastwards, he found an unexpected ally in the formidable Hephthalites, also known as the White Huns, whose raids had previously devastated Persian cities on numerous occasions. With their military support, Kavad made a triumphant return in 498 AD and reclaimed the throne, deposing the puppet ruler installed by the nobility. Now he was not only emperor, but a man hungry for retribution. Kavad established stringent control over the state, generously rewarding his supporters and ruthlessly dealing with traitors. During his second reign, he acted with considerably more circumspection. While not entirely abandoning Mazdakite ideals, he nonetheless tempered his rhetoric, striving to maintain a balance of power within the country. During this period, the Sasanian Empire experienced a surge in military power. Kavad strengthened the army with new recruits, reorganized the tax system, and re-established control over strategically vital territories such as Armenia and the banks of the Tigris River. However, parallel to this, tensions escalated with Byzantium, which observed Persia's strengthening and radical transformations with apprehension. Kavad ruled until his death in 531 AD, leaving behind a complex legacy. On the one hand, he is remembered as an emperor who dared to challenge aristocratic norms and strengthen the empire militarily. On the other hand, his alliance with Mazdak provoked deep resentment from the nobility, who never truly forgave him for this action. However, if Kavad was known for his rebellious spirit, his son was destined to be a builder. Following Kavad's death, Khosrow Anushirvan, dubbed the Just, one of the most celebrated emperors in Iranian history, ascended the throne. When Kavad I passed away in 531 AD, the Sasanian Empire, despite its strength, still felt the repercussions of the social and religious upheavals caused by his father's reign. It was amidst these challenging circumstances that Khosrow Anushirvan ascended the throne, earning his epithet Immortal Soul, or Undying Spirit, for good reason. For almost half a century, this emperor defined an era of flourishing Sasanian civilization. Khosrow I is primarily remembered as a reformer. Having learned from his father's mistakes, he decisively suppressed the Mazdakite movement, while avoiding arbitrary purges. He ordered the execution of Mazdak, the movement's spiritual leader, but then channeled public discontent into concrete reforms. Khosrow I's reign was marked by a series of transformations that impacted various aspects of state life. First and foremost, he thoroughly modernized the tax system, aiming for greater fairness and efficiency. The tax burden was now distributed according to the economic potential of each region, which strengthened the empire's financial foundation without impoverishing the peasant class. In the military sphere, Khosrow I undertook a far-reaching reorganization of the army. For the first time in history, heavy cavalry, the striking force of the Persian army, was funded directly from the state treasury. This step not only reduced dependence on the feudal nobility, but also bolstered the soldiers' loyalty to the emperor. Thus emerged the renowned Isvaran, elite horsemen whose power and martial skill struck fear into Persia's enemies. Khosrow I also strengthened the bureaucratic apparatus, implementing a system of meritocracy where the most talented and competent individuals could occupy administrative positions, regardless of their origin. This principle allowed the empire to function more effectively and cohesively. However, Khosrow I's genius was not confined to politics and military affairs. He was a true patron of culture and sciences. With a passionate love for knowledge, he initiated the translation of crucial Greek and Indian philosophical and scientific treatises into Middle Persian, Pahlavi, opening a treasure trove of wisdom for Persian scholars. He generously welcomed learned men from Syria, India, and Byzantium to his court, fostering the development of medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. When Emperor Justinian I closed the philosophical schools in Athens, many of these scholars found refuge in Persia under Khosrow I's patronage, a testament to his commitment to knowledge and intellectual freedom. Khosrow I's foreign policy was characterized by shrewdness and firmness. In 532 AD, he concluded the so-called Eternal Peace with the Byzantine Empire, under which the Byzantines were obliged to pay tribute in exchange for security guarantees. However, this period of peace proved short-lived. Tension soon arose due to the Byzantine emperor's refusal to fulfill his financial obligations, to which Khosrow responded immediately and forcefully. In 540 AD, Persian forces under his leadership captured and plundered Antioch, inflicting a devastating defeat on the Eastern Roman Empire. As spoils of war, Khosrow brought immense treasures back to Ctesiphon, where he ordered the construction of an entire quarter for the captured inhabitants and artisans. But Khosrow's activities were not limited to military campaigns. He dedicated immense attention to restoring the country's economy and infrastructure. At his command, irrigation systems were rebuilt, farming communities ravaged by wars were revived, and new cities were founded. The capital, Ctesiphon, transformed into a thriving center of trade, art, and science. Khosrow I's reign became a period of unprecedented prosperity and stability, which many historians consider Persia's true golden age. In religious policy, Khosrow remained faithful to Zoroastrianism, but did not display fanaticism or intolerance towards other religions. While strengthening his position as a defender of the state faith, he permitted a certain degree of religious diversity. Even when one of his sons embraced Christianity, the emperor imposed no sanctions upon him. With the death of Khosrow I in 579 AD, an era concluded, leaving behind a rich legacy of harmony, innovation, and imperial splendor. Under his rule, Persia rose not only as a formidable military power, but also as a civilizational hub, radiating the light of culture and enlightenment. His reign transformed into legend. In the memory of posterity, he remained the epitome of a wise, just, and far-sighted ruler. However, days of greatness, as is well known, are not eternal. Khosrow I's successors, particularly his son, inherited a powerful empire, but also the first signs of impending upheavals that they could not yet fully comprehend. Following the death of Khosrow I in 579, the Sasanian Empire stood at the zenith of its power, characterized by its strength, stability, and widespread respect. His son, Hormuz IV, inherited this authority but, regrettably, did not inherit his father's wisdom. His reign, from 579 to 590, was marked by rising internal tensions with the aristocracy and military, gradually eroding the unity achieved under his predecessor. After his assassination in a palace coup, the reins of power passed to a new, ambitious emperor, Khosrow II Perviz, the grandson of the great Khosrow I. Khosrow II's ascension to the throne was not peaceful. He faced a serious military rebellion and was forced to seek support from the Byzantine Emperor Maurice to reclaim his authority. This alliance with Byzantium, forged in 591, enabled him to restore control over the empire, but the peace that followed proved fragile and short-lived. A protracted conflict became possible when the Byzantine Empire plunged into political instability. The overthrow and execution of Emperor Maurice, by the general Phocas in a palace coup enraged Khosrow II. The Persian monarch saw this as a convenient pretext to launch the largest military campaign in the history of the Sasanian realm. The time had come to repay past assistance and settle old scores with the Roman Empire. Persian legions fell upon their enemy with unstoppable fury. Within a few years, they captured Damascus, Jerusalem, and Egypt, and came perilously close to Constantinople, besieging the Byzantine capital in 626. This was a pivotal moment in history, as the two most powerful empires of late antiquity engaged in a merciless, deadly struggle. Nevertheless, the impregnable walls of Constantinople withstood the assault. It was then that a new Roman emperor, Heraclius, appeared on the political stage. This unexpected leader displayed extraordinary strategic talent. While the Persians besieged his capital, he executed a daring maneuver, crossing the Black Sea, traversing Anatolia, and striking at the very heart of the Sasanian Empire. His actions not only caused significant material damage, but also sowed an atmosphere of suspicion and fear within Persian military and political circles. Byzantine agents, like venomous serpents, spread disinformation about betrayal, leading to escalating internal tensions within the Sasanian Empire and its subsequent implosion. The warlord Sharbaraz, renowned for his military prowess, fell victim to a cunning intrigue. Forged letters, skillfully fabricated, convinced him that Khosrow II was secretly planning his elimination. Blinded by rage and a thirst for vengeance, the general withdrew his troops from obedience, thereby paralyzing a significant portion of the Persian army. The sudden death of Shahin, a talented commander who had successfully led troops in Anatolia, dealt a heavy blow to the empire. Simultaneously, another key general, whose military services had been invaluable, also passed away. Deprived of its experienced commanders, and facing Heraclius's advance into Mesopotamia, the heartland of the empire, the Sasanian realm began to crumble rapidly. In 627, the decisive Battle of Nineveh occurred, where Heraclius achieved a crushing victory, inflicting irreparable damage on the Persians. Soon after, Byzantine troops, meeting little serious resistance, plundered the temple of Taqi Soliman, a sacred site for Zoroastrians, symbolizing a profound humiliation for the Persian people. Capitalizing on the widespread chaos, the nobility overthrew Khosrow II, and in 628 he was executed on the orders of his own son. His death marked the end of the reign of the most ambitious Persian emperor, but simultaneously ushered in a period of profound turmoil and political instability. In just 4 years, 14 rulers succeeded each other on the Sasanian throne, each coming to power as a result of a coup, assassination, or betrayal. The empire, exhausted by decades of continuous warfare, weakened by internal intrigues, and deprived of strong leadership, found itself on the verge of complete collapse. It was at this moment, with the eastern giant vanquished, that a new power emerged from the Arabian desert, Islam, ready to change the course of history. In 632, as the Sasanian Empire experienced a period of instability characterized by changes in rulers, political assassinations, and general decline, a spiritual and military transformation was taking root across the Arabian Peninsula. The death of the Prophet Muhammad did not halt the spread of his teachings, which, like a flame, encompassed an ever-growing number of adherents. The Arab world, united under the banner of the Islamic Caliphate, after centuries of submission to empires such as the Roman and Persian, prepared for expansion. Yazdijir III, the last Sasanian emperor, ascended the throne at a young age. As the grandson of Khosrow II, he possessed neither the experience nor the support necessary to avert the impending threat. The empire was in a state of exhaustion, fragmentation, and moral decay. The provinces suffered from abuse, corruption, and popular discontent. The population, burdened by exorbitant taxes, no longer saw the aristocracy as a symbol of unity, but merely an instrument of oppression. Arab forces began their offensive from the borders of modern-day Iraq. Although the Persians offered resistance and achieved a victory at the Battle of the Bridge in 634, this was only a temporary respite. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, Muhammad's father-in-law, reorganized the Muslim forces, placing Khalid ibn al-Walid, known as the Sword of God, and one of the most distinguished strategists in history, at their head. In 637 AD, the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah unfolded, becoming a pivotal moment in history. Muslim forces clashed in a deadly struggle with the Persian army, and the outcome of this battle sealed the fate of an entire empire. Despite the might of Sasanian cavalry and formidable war elephants, the Persian army suffered a crushing defeat. The consequences of this defeat were catastrophic for Persia. Within months, the Muslims triumphantly entered Ctesiphon, the Sasanian capital. However, the last Sasanian king, Ardashir III, did not accept defeat. He fled east, seeking to raise the banner of resistance in distant provinces. For many years, he tried to secure support from local peoples, sent envoys to distant China, and sought every opportunity to reclaim his lost lands. But all his efforts proved futile. In 642, the Muslims achieved another decisive victory at the Battle of Nihawand, finally breaking the back of the Sasanian army. Then, in 651, wandering alone, Ardashir III fell not at the hand of an enemy commander, but a local miller in Merv. His death was devoid of heroism and grandeur. There was no martyrdom in battle, no final desperate gesture. Only silence, flight, and betrayal. Thus, the history of the Sasanian Empire came to an inglorious end. It fell not under the assault of superior forces, but under the strike of a younger, more unified, and faith-inspired army. The Islamic invasion was not merely a military campaign, but a spiritual, cultural, and political revolution. Within a few decades, Zoroastrianism, the ancient religion of kings and philosophers, gave way to Islam, which became the dominant faith in the region. Under the harsh pressure, when it seemed that the ancient faith was doomed to complete disappearance, not all inhabitants succumbed to fate. The most steadfast members of the nobility, spiritual leaders, and influential families chose to leave their homeland. Their path led to India, where they laid the foundations of the Parsi community, which became a bastion of Zoroastrianism, preserving its sacred fire to this day. These exiles carried with them not only religious beliefs, but also invaluable fragments of Persian culture, works of art, scientific knowledge, and the very soul of ancient Persia. The collapse of the Sasanian Empire was not merely a change of ruling dynasty. This event marked the end of an entire era, the twilight of the ancient world, when Persia was a mighty empire, a cultural center, a worthy rival to Rome, and the creator of a brilliant civilization. The subsequent changes led to the formation of a new world, which, however, could never recreate its former grandeur. Although the Sasanian Empire fell under the blows of Islamic conquerors, its legacy was not consigned to oblivion. On the contrary, it profoundly influenced subsequent civilizations. Like an underground river, hidden from sight yet tirelessly flowing, this legacy continued to nourish new ideas, styles, religious beliefs, and social systems. In the political and administrative spheres, the Sasanian model of centralized governance, with its clearly organized provinces, orderly taxation system, and professional bureaucracy, served as a source of inspiration for the Abbasid Caliphate, which later inherited Baghdad. Even Muslim rulers adopted many Sasanian titles and rituals, such as the solemn accession ceremony, the wearing of luxurious diadems, and the veneration of the monarch as a sacred figure. In the intellectual sphere, the Sasanians were renowned for founding educational institutions that became a meeting place for erudite scholars from Greece, Syria, India, and Persia. It was thanks to their efforts that the works of Plato, Aristotle, and Galen did not vanish into oblivion, being translated first into Middle Persian and then into Arabic, thereby preserving Greek philosophy from oblivion during the European Middle Ages. In the realm of art, the Sasanian influence proved even deeper. Islamic art, with its monumental domes, exquisite tapestries, masterful calligraphy, and harmonious gardens, largely inherited Sasanian design and aesthetics. The majestic arch at Ctesiphon, the masterful use of mosaics, strict architectural geometry, and luxurious fabrics, all these elements became an integral part of the visual culture of the Muslim world. Surprisingly, the echoes of the Sasanian Empire even reached Western lands. Persian carpets adorned the palaces of European monarchs, and the vestments of some Christian saints were crafted from silk fabrics produced on Sasanian looms. Their reputation for sophistication even reached Merovingian France. In the religious sphere, despite Zoroastrianism being displaced by Islam, its dualistic worldview, with its eternal struggle between good and evil, its concept of posthumous recompense and the Last Judgment, exerted an indirect influence on Christianity, late Judaism, and Islam. The sacred fire, reverence for nature, and faithfulness to one's word, these ancient ideas continue to live on today. In remembering the Sasanian Empire, we see not only a formidable adversary to Rome, but also a civilization that managed to defy time, endure a succession of wars, and, even in its fall, sow the seeds of ideas that blossomed in other cultures. Ultimately, the immortality of an empire is determined not by the might of its walls or armies, but by the invisible traces it leaves in human history.